Morning and welcome everyone to this morning's TechCentral.ie webinar in association with Sophos. I'm Niall Kitson, editor of TechCentral.ie and host for this morning's session where we're looking at the long-term effects of ransomware. This year has seen a number of high-profile ransomware attacks targeting the likes of Marks and Spencer, the Co-op, Jaguar Land Rover, Collins Aerospace, and just this week, apparently, although yet to be confirmed, is the Japanese brewer Asahi. These breaches have dealt not only commercial but also reputational damage, which can take some time to repair. However, according to this year's State of Ransomware Report from Sophos, lessons are being learned. At international level, the actual number of ransomware attacks is declining. Most data encrypted in attacks is recovered, and response times are improving. And indeed, fewer people are paying up. And those who do pay are often paying less than the initial demand. In many cases, companies can fully recover in as little as a week. But there's another cost that isn't as visible or talked about so much, and that's the cost to teams in terms of cohesion and mental health. From generalized anxiety to fear over career prospects, teams are excelling at their work, but the long-term effects are extremely damaging. To explore this topic, we are joined by Jonathan Hope, cybersecurity evangelist at Sophos, Jennifer Cox, startup solutions engineering and sales leader at Times, recruitment professional Ellie Doyle, and Brian Honan, CEO and principal consultant at BH Consulting. So, to give us an overview, I'd just like to go to you, Jonathan, and just give us the lie of the land at the moment. I gave a few sort of general trends there, but perhaps you'd like to dig into them a little bit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be delighted. So I should probably introduce, well, myself very briefly. You already mentioned I'm John Hope. I'm Senior Technology Evangelist at Sophos, and I've been at Sophos since 2011, and I've enjoyed a lot of different experiences during my time here. But always one of my highlights, certainly in recent years, has been the publication of the State of Ransomware Report. So the State of Ransomware Report is now in its sixth year, and although it's commissioned by Sophos as a cybersecurity vendor, we actually employ a third-party market research company to do the data collection on our behalf because we don't want to introduce any bias. So we have yet to ask the recipients of the survey and the respondees what they are doing about cybersecurity. So we don't ask for vendors, and they're not selected from our customer base. They are selected entirely at random. So the real idea is that we get a bit of a barometer for the state of cyber security and cyber threats across the whole world. So it is a survey that is in the thousands of recipients and across 17 different countries and all sorts of different company sizes and all sorts of different verticals. So it is a really interesting kind of insight. So a couple of things that we are watching for, because of course this is all about this kind of the human aspects of ransomware. And one of the things we're watching for is how do organizations actually get hit in the first place? And this is a very, very interesting area of research for us because what we're increasingly seeing is that although technology naturally plays a part in these attacks, actually the human being is a significant part of the attack chain from both the protagonists and also from the victim angle. So on the face of it, the kind of key metric that we look at is how organizations get penetrated. And we've seen that consistently exploited vulnerabilities are the kind of main reason, which you would think is a technology problem, right? Because people are not patching their software, they're not updating successfully. But I would argue and posit that that is actually a human problem in its own right because it is 2025 and most people most organizations know they should be patching their software, they should be updating, they should be removing legacy systems. But it's one of those things that just falls by the wayside because there's never enough time. So although on the face of it it's a technology problem, it's actually, in my mind, a human problem from the get-go. And then underneath there, we have a lot of human-related factors. So the next most common attack vectors include things like social engineering for phishing purposes, the victims having their credentials stolen and then used against organizations as well is very common. So these are all things that unfortunately there isn't really a technology fix for, and we have to look to processes and procedures to train humans to be ideally be better at spotting social engineering attacks. And and deflecting them. So that's a bit of an overview of some of the kind of key approaches that cybercriminals execute on. From an organizational perspective, organizations state things like not having enough resources, not having enough technical skill, which is quite interesting. I think there is a general feeling within the IT community now that threat hunting is becoming very challenging, very difficult. It is not something that an IT generalist can do very successfully. But most organizations still don't invest in dedicated threat hunters or consider the other option, which is to outsource that threat hunting and engage with a vendor like Sophos and consider things like managed detection and response services where you've got humans actually looking at telemetry and looking at the data on your behalf. Um, so yeah, definitely human problems from that perspective. Also, technology gaps, often oversight, to be honest. People not necessarily considering every security gap, not considering certain things to be threats, even though they are, is quite a common thing that we see. Then just moving on to what happens next from a data perspective. Obviously, in almost every case, the cyber criminals are trying to encrypt your data. And this is where we see some really interesting trends that again worry me a little bit considering it's 2025. So when we look at the worldwide statistics, we see that the cyber criminals in 50% of cases, they're actually able to successfully encrypt data. And more worryingly, unfortunately, we don't break Ireland separately to the UK, but I can tell you from a UKI perspective that it's actually higher values now. It's actually 70% of cases where the cyber criminals have encrypted data across the two territories. And that speaks a little bit about the inadequacies of certain cybersecurity solutions. So the cybercriminals will often execute an attack vector which is called remote ransomware. This is where they're finding one device that's weak in the network or not protected, and then using it as a bridgehead to go and attack other devices, which is something that most cybersecurity vendors don't cover, and why we still see such a high level of success. Um, then I'll move on to kind of the last real stat that I want to just talk very briefly about, and that is the propensity of organizations to pay the ransom demand. And it is interesting that really the approach of paying the cyber criminals off is actually something that we start to see increasing. So this is worrying because it actually perpetuates the problem. If we continue to pay cyber criminals off, they are more likely to continue their attacks. It actually encourages more people into the industry. And I do very deliberately use the word industry. In other talks that I've done in presentations, we actually kind of uncover a lot more about cybercrime gangs and how organized they are. So it is very much an industry, and we perpetuate the problem. It's actually pretty poor from an ROI perspective, as well as the moral, ethical argument about kicking the can down the road. Um, you will typically get about 50% of your data back. You can't choose what that 50% is. It's probably not in a good format. So when we start thinking about long-term recovery, it is not a silver bullet that you magically all of a sudden you're back into operation if you choose to use the decryption keys that are provided. But we also see, interestingly, quite a heavy decline in the use of backup and recovery software. And it's not so much that people aren't buying and deploying backup and recovery software. It's just the cyber criminals know you're probably not going to be paying the ransom if you've got a good backup. So they will actually actively attack the backup as usually one of the first things that happens once an attack gets started. So a little bit of a call to action for everybody early on is that one, make sure you've got a good backup strategy, but also make sure you test it and also make sure you're monitoring your backups. When we protect organizations using our managed detection and response service, we actively hook into their backups so that we kind of perceive it like an early warning mechanism because it is generally one of the first things that cyber criminals go after. So definitely something to review because you certainly don't want to find out your backup strategy is no good when you really need to use it in anger. Um, yeah, so those are some of the highlights really. And then the bit that I know grabbed your interest in particular, Niall, is for the first time we've started to ask organizations a bit more about not just the financial costs, but also the human costs associated with ransomware. And I think this is a really important thing because in almost every walk of life we consider mental health quite a lot, but this is the IT seems to be one of these industries that we still don't really think about it too much, and we don't really consider the human cost associated with attacks of this nature.
Yeah, so when we're looking at the fallout, it seems that the consequences fall into two broad buckets. where you've got sort of the personal issues sort of at the individual level, and also the organizational issues that come along with it as well. So just to throw a few stats from the report out, which I thought were pretty good frames, 40% of cybersecurity professionals reported increased anxiety or stress about future attacks. Another 40% said they experienced increased pressure from senior leaders. And one that I'm going to zero in on with Ellie later are 34%, so just over a third, experienced feelings of guilt. So, which on one level, I think it is pretty good because it speaks to the pride people take in their work. But, there is this mental health downside. Then on the organizational level, you're looking at, 38% experience a change of team priorities and focus. I suppose once bitten kind of an experience there. Consequently, there would be an ongoing increase in workload, changes to teams and organizational structures, increased recognition from senior leaders, which can actually be quite a positive thing. But also you've got replacement of leadership, sort of that lack of consistency, and of course, staff absences due to stress or mental health issues, something that sort of straddles both. Um, so, just finally with you, Jonathan, were these findings particularly surprising to you? Was it something that you knew would factor in the report, but perhaps not to this extent?
Very good question. So, specifically to the human cost, I actually kind of didn't really know what to expect because for many of the things that we've been monitoring with the state of ransomware, we've got 6 years worth of data. So you can kind of predict and estimate where the trends are going, but we've never really asked about the human element before. The general responses are the kind of things I would have expected. I do echo your sentiment there about the pride aspect. I would expect people to feel guilty and responsible in some way, even if they haven't actually done anything wrong. And it's not because they should feel guilty or responsible, but it's just because we most of us at least want to do a good job and we're proud of what we do. And when things go wrong in the organization, you kind of would have expected people to take that upon themselves, whether that's justifiable or not. But the one statistic that really stepped out for me more than anything else was the fact that so many organizations actually choose to replace leadership. I did not expect it to be a quarter of respondents having some kind of leadership change. And I do think that's quite worrying in a lot of ways because in I guess in some cases are organizational failings that go behind this, but in some cases, organizations potentially were just a little bit unfortunate. And certainly it's unlikely that it would be one individual. So we often perceive from conversations that we have that organizations maybe feel, "Oh, we didn't invest in the right things or we didn't set things up properly." But these are decisions that are seldom made by one individual. So to see organizations replacing leadership and looking at managerial changes, it does genuinely quite surprise me, to be honest with you. Increased pressure and workload, again, you would have expected that. I didn't expect to see such a large percentage of organizations experiencing actual staff absence off the back of these attacks. But I probably, in hindsight, I suppose I probably should have expected that a little bit more, but I didn't expect the numbers to be quite so high. I mean, we as well as offering protection services, we offer an incident response service, and this is kind of like the cyber fire brigade where you can call us even if you've never been a Sophos customer, and we actually help people to work through the process of being attacked. And you do hear people really at their worst when they phone up. We've had people crying and just getting really stressed about these things. But I never really considered the long-term implications for people's sort of mental well-being. But that again probably speaks to the fact that as an industry, we don't really think about mental health all that much, and we probably should be considering that sort of thing a little bit more.
Yeah, Brian, let me just bring you into the conversation there. Do these figures kind of tally with your experience? Are you seeing companies and professionals experiencing more stress and more sort of long-term fallout?
Absolutely not. I have to say, I read, I suppose, glee or joy is the wrong phrase to use, but I was very pleased to read the Sophos report, and I've no ties with Sophos, so this is not a sponsored endorsement from me. But the Sophos ransomware report is a State of Ransomware Report. It's an excellent report, and I read it every year, and there's some great information in it. So, John, if you pass on my thanks to the rest of the team who compiled that report, it's very good. And as I said, I was delighted to see the focus, or some of the report focusing on the human element here, because we struggle in our industry. We all talk about the cyber skills gap, and there are, there's lots of vacancies that need to be filled. But at the same time, people don't realize that we have a lot of turnover and churn in the industry because of the mental health pressures that a lot of people fall under. Many businesses don't appreciate what cybersecurity is to their business. They still see cybersecurity as an IT problem. So therefore, it's down to the cyber people or the IT team to look at it. In particularly in the Irish context, we're a country of medium and small firms. So there's very few organizations in Ireland, apart from the large financial institutions and et cetera, companies of those size, that would have dedicated cybersecurity teams. It's often a one-person role within an IT team, and that person then has to try and pull resources elsewhere. So that even before there's an attack, it's a very stressful job, because you're seen as the Dr. No, the stopper of everything. Oh, we can't do this because of security. So therefore, there's a lot of blame being put towards the cyber team or the cyber person for projects not being delivered at time or other issues. And then John touched on it there. Cybersecurity people can also be going to the business saying, "No, this is not my issue. This is a risk. Yes, it's a cyber risk, but fundamentally, it's a business risk. If we have an outage as a result of a ransomware attack or any other type of cyber attack or data leakage or a breach in any way, shape, or form, that is a business issue. But particularly nowadays with ransomware, we've seen it with Jaguar, Land Rover, where their systems have been offline for weeks. Their supply chain is being hit, that there are companies in the Jaguar Land Rover supply chain looking to shut down and go bankrupt because they can't sell into Jaguar Land Rover anymore. There's staff in Jaguar Land Rover who have been furloughed and are working, and the IT team and cyber team are probably working ridiculous hours to try and get things together. And we've also seen the co-op with Marks and Spencers, and not too long ago with the HSE ransomware attack here as well. So there's a lot of issues there, and like I've been taking loads of notes. I think fundamentally we need the business to better understand that cyber risk is a business risk, and therefore they need to treat it as such and give the right resources to it. There is the joke that the title CSO doesn't really stand for Chief Security Officer. It's more like Chief Scapegoat Officer. So when things go wrong, you get the blame. And ISC Squared, they have done survey, and they show that 34% of IT cybersecurity professionals are not satisfied in their job. So now we take all those things together. The pressures that our cybersecurity people are facing in the jobs on a day-to-day basis, never mind as a result of a breach. And then a breach happens, the finger can often be pointed towards them as being, well, it's your fault. You're the cybersecurity team or person. You should have seen this or stopped this from happening, or when the breach does happen, trying to get it back up and running. It does have a significant risk. And sorry, just one other point as well before I hand back. I know we're talking about the impact on cybersecurity professionals here, but when a breach happens, it's not only the cybersecurity professionals that are impacted. It's probably the other people in the IT team as well, because very often in an incident response, you're pulling in every resource you can from all parts of IT. So So they can be impacted as well as the business, because you may need to get PR people involved, HR people involved, senior management involved. So it's a crisis. This is a crisis that happens, and all the issues that go with that from a mental health point of view. And but also, that the staff who are in that company, they may be worried about their jobs. They may be worried, is the company going to shut down? Are we going to lose business? Are there going to be layoffs? And like, I'm citing a survey here now that I came across there last year of 1,000 people in the UK who were surveyed as a result of their experience in cybercrime, and 62% of them felt traumatized as a result. John talked there about shame. 60% felt shame, and 67% felt embarrassed. 55% reported ongoing anxiety, particularly when using online services, and then 29% had trouble sleeping. So, you people, not just in the cybersecurity team, that will maybe demonstrate symptoms of PTSD, but also people in the company, or particularly a member of staff who may have been tricked by a phishing email or persuaded to give the password over on a phone call or whatever, or clicked on something that caused malware to be downloaded. So it's something that it happens a lot. We don't look at the personal side and the impact on people when it comes to cybersecurity or breaches. The focus always tends to be on technology, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
Jennifer, we were talking earlier just before we went live there about the awfulness of having to do a patch after hours and then crossing your fingers and hoping you don't get a phone call or an alert saying that something has gone wrong again. Just take us through your experience.
So I've been both a practitioner and then on the preventative and on the reactive. That's actually three things, not both, on all of those different sides of things. So I've kind of broadened my perspective over the years with regards understanding the impact of that, especially on the individuals that are doing it. But having been an individual that is responsible for something as simple as patching, I mean, it comes with a certain level of anxiety. You're typically working out of the hours that most people are working, because you don't want to affect the business and them getting their job done. So outside of the antisocial hours, you're typically also then not going to have a whole lot of support if you do have issues or something goes wrong, if you do patch something and it doesn't work, and then having to revert it back. But yes, I've spent many a time working overnight, putting patches on systems, and then doing the finger crossed, praying that nothing goes wrong, and waiting for alerts to come in, or being on call for those kind of alerts. And when they do come in, and it's all hands on deck to get everything up and running, because people have come in of a Monday morning and something that should work and looked like it was going to work doesn't work. So that's now it's easier in some ways to know about those things, because you can, of course, automate information from your logs to be able to identify if there's issues post patching, or even just when people go back into their day to day. But I think what's underappreciated, and listening to both Brian and Jonathan talk about the impact of any breaches there too, is that education for anyone in any company is really important when it comes to cybersecurity. Everybody understanding that it's important to them. So, I mean, if you're the user who leaves your password stuck underneath your keyboard and you're thinking, oh, Brian's going to be cross with me now. If he sees that I've done that, I'll be in trouble. Yes, Brian will be cross with you for doing it, but he's not just cross with you for doing it because it's just a downright daft thing to do. He's cross because if somebody gets your password and gets access to the system, that's his weekend on, or his night, or possibly even a week. He's going to be ready to act by people up the chain because you did that. He's going to have to put practices in place, deploy 2FA, then educate everybody on all of these other ways of using the system, so that they don't, even if they do leave their password on their desk like that, so that he can reduce the risk then from that side. There's that responsibility that will fall ultimately to the individual that deploys it. There's a lack of knowledge typically above the individuals that are doing the practice too, and what that actually means. They understand the hours, they're paying the hours, but they don't understand the mental pressure as such there too. Now, most people that I know that do it and choose to do it and love it are also just a little bit twisted, because that's the way to survive it. You have to be able to go home and switch it off and not worry too much about it. But that said, I was at a conference in Scotland think it was about 2 years ago, and I listened to an Australian CISO talk about how their company was breached and it brought the whole company to the knees. It ended up ruining the company essentially. And he received death threats from companies that they were working with because of the impact to their customers, to him, to his family. He had a breakdown as a result of it. I've spoken to CISOs who, most of them, all of them probably should be at this stage, have personal insurance because they can personally be sued for something that's happened within the company, even if they've put all of the best practices in place. And if Joe Bloggs leaves the front door open and you're held liable for it, that's a lot for people to take on a personal level. And then if you're lucky enough, we all work to prevent these things happening. But inevitably, there's going to be a certain percentage of companies who will assume because you're doing your job and they're hearing nothing that they're now never going to be exposed. But we should always think that we are always, open to exposure. Everybody should always presume it will happen at some time, any company at any size. And then they should practice, what do we do if these systems come down? Business continuity is key. What do we do if everybody can't access X, Y, and Z to make sure that we keep the business running? If you don't do that, then that's a very big problem. But in the event that there has been a breach and people get in and remediate the breach, they put in the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, as it was with the HSE, even in that sense. And then it's all over and everything calms down. And those individuals will, as I always say, they're going to crash after that, just both physically, mentally, emotionally. They have to make up to all of their families that they haven't seen for a significant amount of time. They're likely to take a hit in their personal budgets because it will affect their targets for uptime. They're likely to get a budget for future security, which is really frustrating when you've wanted it for years and you don't get it, but you only get it when something goes wrong. Because quiet security teams are the best security teams. It means it's all working. The ones where you're hearing about incidents means something is not working and you need to do more. So when they're quiet, they're great. Give them more money. When they're quiet, keep giving them money. It will keep them quiet. It means it's still working. But after that, then they're the ones that people are talking about in the office. Oh yeah, there was a breach. That was Ellie was supposed to have sorted that, and I haven't seen her for months now. Now look at her. Look, she looks a state because she was dealing with that. There's that personal level too, where you're worrying that people think you're no good at what you do, or you get fired. People will be let go. People have been thrown in. I know it was Equifax, I think it was. That's probably 10 years ago now, and it feels like yesterday. Through their main set person under the bus, when the reality is the solution or the prevention for that issue was something that he continually brought to the table and been told no. And so it wasn't his fault. He couldn't put something in place. But companies will look for that scapegoat, like Brian was saying, your CSO, they're looking for the scapegoat. So people will go into that job to some extent knowing they could be the scapegoat, to a lot of extent worrying that they're going to be the scapegoat. But nobody will ever fully appreciate until they're on the outcome of it, when everything's up and running and everything is back, and then they get a minute to stop and think, and there's likely to be a debrief, which in itself is going to be haunting because all of your flaws, whether you have control over them or not, are going to be pointed out. And depending on the company you're in, people may or may not take responsibility for what was truly their responsibility in that at all different levels. There'll be blame and pushing everywhere. Now, I've just painted a really ugly, bad story. There are also some great ones, like there's an aluminium company or aluminum, depending on where you're from, company in the Nordics, I think it was, who were breached and shut everything down and went back to pen and paper and manually calculating the sizes of everything they manufactured. And it was an all hands on deck. Everybody got in, no matter what your role was in that company. People came back from retirement in order to be able to keep the company in production, so that the IT team were left alone to get everything back up and running. So if you're in your little room doing your quick fire fixes for things and getting everything up and running, and Joan is calling you because her laptop's not working, if you haven't practiced that, you need to make sure that everybody knows. Leave them alone, let them get stuff up and running, and every team should have their own kind of go-to. What do we do when we can do nothing but use pen and paper? So there's a lot of things there, but every single person in the company has responsibility. But what I'm seeing, certainly with people I mentor, people that I have worked with, jobs I've done myself, and just generally across the industry for people with responsible roles, is that the finger pointing and the blame is the hardest part. And I don't know anyone who works in cybersecurity who doesn't care about doing a good job. So it's taken very, very personally then in that case.
Ellie, I'd like to move to you now because you've got that sort of recruitment background. If somebody has worked on recovering from a breach successfully or unsuccessfully, is it considered an important learning experience, or is it or do people consider it something of a red flag on their CV?
I don't think so, Niall. I think what the most important thing is to show that you are aware of it. So, like with everything on your personal brand or your profile, um, you may as well flag it before the person who potentially is going to employ you. It's not, it's just being able to show that you're aware of it. And I actually, I'm always saying to candidates when they're going through, if there is an incident in their background, and as we all know these days, we all leave a digital footprint. It's very hard, for it not to be there. But even just flagging that you're aware of it, talking, it actually gives you a good opportunity to even use, I'm sure everyone is familiar with the STAR technique, which is a little bit old hat, but I actually think it's great. It gives the candidate some control: situation, task, action, results, or outcome. But so if, for example, if we look at the post office in the UK and what went on there, that was, horrendous. And getting back to what somebody mentioned earlier, the effect on those people's mental health was, there was a lot of fallout from that. But if you were one of the people, involved, just even being able to say, I know, because the chances are, if you're going for an interview, they have done their due diligence, so they'll have researched you. So the fact that you have also showed that I'm aware of this situation, I'm going to address it. It shows that you're not afraid to. It'll make a lot of. It will allow the person considering you for employment to not only get to know you better, but it actually will allow you to showcase those good qualities, such as, self-awareness being the most important one, but also it allows you the opportunity to talk about, what those learnings are. And I always say, so I sold my business after 10 years. I'm hopefully going to set up another business. And I was saying to somebody the other day, I feel like I did 10 years ago, except I've actually got this 10 years of experience. So my point is, if you're hiring somebody who had been through some sort of, incident, what the chances of them repeating that under your tenure or under your employment is a lot less. So it can actually be a good thing, and it's just about how the narrative and how you explain it. But the worst thing anyone can do is to totally ignore it, because that will be a red flag. The fact that you were involved, whether that's actively or passively, will not necessarily be a red flag. But know thine own CV, I always say. We do live in a world where everything is out there in the digital ecosphere. So, just being able to be aware of it and have answers. It doesn't have to be, I did actually consult with an employment law professional who I do a lot of work with, and she said there's no legal obligation unless it's asking you, did you have a criminal record? But say, for the purposes of this conversation, on IT or cybersecurity or ransomware, there's no legal obligation on the candidate's part to mention it. But as I say, it would show maybe, you're leaving people going, I didn't want to ask Niall that. Do you think Niall knows that we know that? And it's, it's just much better to get it over and done with.
And have you found that actually works in the opposite direction as well? That, word might get out that company X isn't particularly great to work for because they do regard cybersecurity as the low man on the totem pole, and it almost doesn't matter how well you work there because you're not going to get the recognition. Does there tend to be that sort of glass door effect, if you will?
Yeah, unfortunately, cybersecurity, it's a bit like in the medical profession. I can guarantee a lot of us don't know who the great doctors are because great work doesn't get mentioned. But you know what? One mistake by a surgeon or whatever and your name's all over the media. So unfortunately, it's a bit like that. You only get the recognition when something goes wrong and there's some sort of scandal. But I personally, I am very cynical about any review sites. I won't name them, because people only review whether it's a restaurant, an employer, or whatever when they've been axe to grind. Very few review, leave the good. I'm not saying it doesn't go on, but I'm just cynical about how much weight it should carry. So I think the thing, Niall, is to just be open and upfront and mature about it, and say, I know this information about me or my company or the project I was assigned to is there. It's there. Let's talk about it. And as I say, that gives the candidate the opportunity to address it and put it to bed. And let's get back to talking about why I'm the right person for this job.
Something just dropped into the Q&A there that I find quite interesting. Should companies integrate a specific protocol for what happens afterwards? Is this something that should be legislated for to help managers? Jonathan, if I can start with you.
That's a very interesting question, and the answer is probably yes. But I think the industry is not quite there yet, and I'm yet to throw that into a search engine and find out what you would get off the back of that. But I think it definitely makes a lot of sense, to be considering the well-being of people after the event and having some sort of plan. I'm certainly, what I can speak about with first-hand experience is organizations that exit incidents of this nature are in a better state are always the ones that have a plan for what happens pre-breach, during breach, and the immediacy afterwards. So actually, to get the best sort of mental health outcomes and supporting people best, then organizations that do have a plan will inevitably leave people in a better state afterwards than those who have no plan at all. So I think it's probably something that we ought to be considering, but it does feel a bit early doors. And to think to legislate is probably quite a challenge, and would be a difficult thing to implement. But I think as a part of good practice, I think it probably would be quite interesting for sure. I'm just going to tug on one of the other points that was mentioned as well, just about whether organisations that have better cybersecurity or worse cybersecurity are more appealing in the job market. Don't really know much about that. It's not my field of expertise, but certainly what I can tell you is that cybersecurity can be a very good differentiator if you're part of a supply chain. Organisations that have good cyber strategy and can demonstrate that probably are more appealing when it comes to offering tenders for particular opportunities, I would suggest. So we often see cybersecurity as a cost center and detrimental to the business from the bottom line perspective. But that's one area where you could actually say, by investing in cyber, because more appealing.
Would you like in there?
Absolutely not. When we engage with clients to help them design and put together their incident response policies, procedures, processes, and build out their team, one of the key issues we call out is that you need a HR person to be on the incident response team. And everybody looks and go, why do you need a HR person? And there's two reasons. Number one, the breach may be down to an insider or a staff member in the company who may have to have disciplinary action there. So you need a HR specialist to help you deal with that. But more specifically, and in relation to this conversation, as I said earlier on, working in a breach, and Jennifer mentioned as well, is it's a very, very stressful situation. This is not your typical IT problem where the system has gone down and you're trying to figure out why the system went down and how you're going to bring it back up again. So that's more like why us geeks love these things. It's a logical challenge. If I plug this in, will it work or whatever, and you go through step by step. In a breach, you are dealing with an adversary who is probably as skilled, if not better skilled than you on your team, and has resources, whose main thing is to make money out of your business and to steal money out of your business. So it's a very adversarial type situation you're in. You're not just trying to restore systems and get them back up and running. You're also trying to see, how do I make sure this criminal doesn't get back into my network again or back into my systems? How do I detect them, block them? How can I be assured that I've covered all the bases, that I haven't missed anything? So that can be very, very stressful. And that's why we recommend having somebody from a HR background there that can help with the team, with their mental health as they're going through the crisis and post-crisis, to help them take breaks. You can't work 24 hours on the go, 5 days in a row to try and fix a solution. You need to take breaks, and you need a HR person there to make sure that the personal needs of the individuals are taken care of. And this is becoming more and more of an issue. And again, Jennifer pointed out about personal liability and responsibility. Under regulations like NIS2 and DORA, individuals in the organization can be found liable for breaches of NIS2 and DORA. So, potentially you as a CISO or an IT manager or an IT professional, you may be sitting in front of a regulator being interrogated as to what your role, or did your actions or lack of actions contribute to this breach, and therefore could have personal impact. So I think it's vitally important that you have HR involved in this, and not just from a breach point of view, but again, coming back to the general topic of mental health in cybersecurity, we are struggling. We've less people required to do more things. Like 2 years ago, we didn't have to worry about AI. Now every security team is trying to figure out, what the hell do we do with AI? We've got people using ChatGPT, we've got LLMs being installed, we've vendors thrown AI into their products without telling us, and we don't understand the risks, and we've got agents being connected left, right, and center. So the stress of the normal day-to-day role in cybersecurity is having an impact. But when things go wrong and there is a breach, it can have significant negative impacts. And I know people who've left the industry because they just can't stay with that type of stress that they face.
Jennifer, if you'd like to chime in there, I really like the thought of cybersecurity being sort of that adversarial incident,
I don't
particularly
like
now.
it.
It definitely makes for interesting storytelling. And I remember being at the Women in Cybersecurity conference in Texas, I think it was last year, and participating in a SANS workshop where they basically do like a live 2 hour, could have been 3 hours even, session where everybody plays a different role in the company, and it's the whole thing is like a live breach. But they make it that little bit spicier by it being in a company that has technology that's health technology, so it would be a threat to life if there was a problem with that technology. So just so that like you can raise your anxiety levels even higher again. And I do remember, because it's been a while since I've been on the practitioner side and more so on like preventative and such now, and fact finding. But I found myself at one point standing in the corner like a totally traumatized individual going, oh my God, because it was just rolling so fast, and it evolves all the time. So if you can have the best people in with the best skills in the world, but if you haven't like got everybody else in the company, at least those in leadership, prepared for when something like that happens, how they're supposed to inform their team, how they're supposed to advise their team on what to do next. For teams that are not related, whether it's like the accounts team, the sales team, whatever, that are not related, on how they're to behave to let the others kind of get on with the job. That's a problem in itself. But one of the things that Brian was saying there about, how much more risk it has in the churn in the role, like you'll see in those, like certainly in CISO roles, in all of the kind of those who are running the show as such, you see them lasting in shorter periods in roles as such because of the stress levels for it. And I know it's very easy if you're looking from the outside and you go, they get paid a lot of money. There's a reason for that, because it's generally, a short term that they'll do in role, and because of the liability and the stress. And in a lot of cases, like Jonathan was talking about the stats there and being somewhat surprised about the turnover at different levels of roles as such too. And what I found is that like some of it is stress, but in many cases, like I was saying earlier, that people who work in cybersecurity as a general rule want to do a good job. They're in it for the right reasons. So if they go into a company and then discover maybe after a week, after 6 months, after 2 years, that they're not going to be able to do their best job because of lack of funding, lack of support, lack of forward thinking or technology, whatever it is that they need to really do it well. And as a general rule, they'll move on because they want to do their best work. And if they're being prevented from doing that, but also being held liable, it just doesn't make sense, to do it. It's like asking a surgeon to go in and here's a spoon and, a ladle, now go and perform that really, really, difficult surgery with that. It doesn't make sense. They're not going to do it. They're going to go somewhere that's going to give them the actual tools that they need to do it. So if you want to retain, and I'm sure, Ellie, I have a lot of questions for you even on this side, but if you want to retain the talent that you're getting, um,
Yeah.
it's less about the money on our side of
Yeah.
things, more about being able to do a good job. Like at the top
Yeah.
choices, when I'm looking to move somewhere and do something for me, it's about, does the culture support? Like, does it move forward? Does it support me as an individual? Does it move forward with the technology and better too? Or are we getting it only? Are
Yeah.
we stop being? If we are stopped from being great, then for me, I'm like, no, because that's not why I got into it. I got into it to do a good job. I got into
Yeah.
it to help other people to protect themselves and reduce risk and understand where all of the issues are and what they can do to help, whether they're in cybersecurity or not. And if I can't do that because of the way my company works, then I move on somewhere else. So yeah, over to you.
Yeah. I'll, if I may just jump in, Niall, I've met a million and one senior level candidates over the years who the reason that they're sitting in front of me is because they felt thrown under a bus, and the company culture is hands down like the biggest different. From a selection criteria on the candidate's part, it's company culture, and that's not ping pong tables and free pizza. That's exactly what Jennifer just spoke about. Will anyone going into cybersecurity knows it's a high risk, high reward environment, but they want to know, and if they identify that they witness that somebody else got thrown under a bus, it's like, no, I do this job because I actually enjoy it. Yes, it's well paid, but I think most people I've met over the years, there is genuinely, there's a vocational calling or whatever, but that piece that Jennifer just spoke about is so important.
Just lastly, while we come close to the end on time, what can managers do to help their cybersecurity teams feel seen, just to see that their work has been noted and appreciated, and hey, we would actually like to keep you around because this has been an important experience for you, but also for us as a company. So maybe Jonathan, if you'd like to jump in there.
Well, it's a good question. I think it probably starts with actually just an element of empathy, from business leaders, that they take the time to understand a little bit more about what the challenges are, and what tools are required. Jennifer, your analogy there of giving a spoon to a surgeon and saying crack on with that is brilliant. I'm going to steal that shamelessly, because we that is something that we do see a lot. um, we see the perception of cybersecurity still being an IT problem. And when IT managers, cybersecurity professionals, and practitioners go to the board and say, I need some more money because I need to buy the scalpel to do my job properly, then it's just perceived as, oh, you just need a new shiny tool, or you need, it's a new toy to play with. And I don't think there still isn't a proper understanding of the challenges and the scale of the problem. Now, if anything at all positive comes out of the continuous stream of headlines from all the names that you've just mentioned, there are more besides that have become victims of ransomware. At least the concept of cybersecurity is something that needs to be taken more seriously. Is at least gravitating into the boardroom finally, and hopefully we'll start to see that change. Um, but I think, yeah, coming back to your original question, I think that understanding, and actually, to be honest with you, rewarding those individuals with the right tools and the right money is probably one of the greatest compliments that you could give, because not only does it take some of the stress away, it takes some of the problems away, but it actually, as you rightly pointed out, Jennifer, I'm going to quote you again, you're empowering people to do their best possible job. So I think those elements are really important. That there's an empathy, that conversation happening, and the right equipment is being provided. One of the best forums for this sort of thing is actually doing the tabletop XLE as well. It's actually sort of practicing these things, and that has so many benefits. For one, if you actually have to invoke your plan, everybody kind of knows what it is. We all rehearse our fire drill every year, right? But we don't do a cybersecurity drill. Now, how odd is that? So actually having that, but actually getting to meet people, in a bigger corporate, then the IT department is probably completely faceless, right? And similarly, the IT department have no idea who the senior managers are. And when it comes to questions like get the critical systems back online, they might not even know what they are. Their perceptions might not marry and meet the expectations of other aspects of the business because everyone is kind of working in a silos. But then as soon as you get the tabletop exercises together, then people build rapport, they understand each other as people. And then once you know somebody as a person, it is a lot more difficult to overlook their kind of mental health and personal needs when you are asking them to do difficult tasks because you put a face to the name that you've just emailed or sent a message to on Teams or whatever. So I think that actually that face-to-face time and making them feel heard by actually listening to them is probably some of the best things that you can do to make a good team. I would suggest security cultures vary enormously, and again, the organisations that have the most positive experiences off the back end of an incident are the ones that have good security culture. For everywhere from being empowered as a user to actually stand up and say, look, I clicked on a link and I shouldn't have done it, rather than burying it, all the way through to investment decisions proactively, are all just much more successful if you have a good security culture where people kind of they get it and they feel like they're in it together.
Brian, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think there's several things you can do now to help support your team cope with the stress and stuff in this. I think first of all is be open and transparent with your team about mental health issues. Encourage discussions in your team, so at your team meetings or whatever. Talk about mental health issues. Allow people to talk about the stresses and strains and provide them with supports. That could be as simple as signing up to uh, mental health awareness websites, etc., and making them, so move away from being a taboo subject and making something that could be talked about, and encourage those discussions. Make sure you for yourself and for, I suppose, actually, the very first step you should do is look after your own mental health. If you're not functioning on all cylinders, it's very hard for you to get your team to function on all cylinders as well. You can't lead if you're not functioning 100%. So look after your own mental health, and that can be simple as making sure you allow your team members, make sure they take their holidays. If they are working late, as Jen said, working late at night patching, allow them for come in late the next morning or take time off. In lieu of that, enable them to recognize people's contributions. If somebody has worked late at night or has done well during the crisis, recognize them. That can be buy lunch or whatever, and they may seem small and insignificant things, but they can, at least you're recognizing people, and give them accountability. Give them ownership of projects that they can do. As a leader, you need to learn to say no to people. So if management come and say, this is what we want to do, you have to be able to push back and protect yourself and your team. And then finally, I would encourage people to allow themselves and their teams to network with other people. There's lots of different communities here in Ireland. You have the Irish Information Security Forum. You have Cyber Ireland, which obviously I'm chairman of, so I have to give them a shout out. Oh, sorry about that. But webinars like this, B-Sides, IRISERT conference, all these conferences that you can go and meet your peers and talk about what's going on and share experiences. Cybersecurity is a unique part of your industry in that we're all fighting the same enemy, basically. So the more we share and the more we collaborate, the better able we are to do it. And then other simple things I'd say is remember the role of you as a cybersecurity person in the business is it's not just a technical role, it's an advisory role. You're trying to make the business aware of this of the risks. So make sure that you communicate those clearly to senior management, so that it's a shared responsibility. That when the smelly stuff hits the air conditioning, it's not all coming down to you. That you can say, well, here's the conversations we had in the past, and they've been raised. So this is a shared responsibility, and we have to deal with it. And then exercise and learn to disconnect and find time for friends and families. End of the day, it's your IT, your senior management are not going to the ones that not the ones that are going to be picking your nursing home or writing what's on your tombstone. That's going to be your family and your friends. So prioritize them, prioritize yourself, and then prioritize the job after that.
Yes, Jennifer, the right to disconnect, would that be high on your list as well?
Absolutely. I'm my own worst enemy personally when it comes to that. I like to potter away and do things at all sorts of stupid hours. But as a leader, I absolutely like police that so hard with people that are on my team, that they, that they make sure that they're offline. They're supposed to be offline, that they stay offline, that when they're on holidays, they're not taking stuff with them. Because I know as a practitioner how much energy it takes to be on it when you're on it. So you do need that downtime, like Brian is saying. And I also know how difficult it is with a family to be doing those things, especially if you've got, on-call aspects of it and stuff too. Because even when you're on call and you're at home and you're not likely to get a call, you're not really at home. I've taken calls, sat in the boot of my car at one of my kids' sports events once with a laptop on my knee, trying to make everything happen all at once. And yeah, like Brian said, I'm all for flexing and moving with those teams. It's not a 9 to 5 job. Like attackers don't go, oh, it's 9 o'clock now. Let's everybody get online and let's see who we're going to attack this morning. That's not how it works. So my expectation is that once they're able to get the stuff that they get done, then work your day around that. Right? That gives people a lot of mental space and a lot of freedom. And if I'm putting my time and effort into making sure that they're happy, then the job they and look after themselves, and then the job looks after itself really from there. And that took a while for me to get into that mental space, from being deeply technical and deeply hands-on to spending time understanding that level of technicality, but on a human level with regards to the people, what they need in order to feel like they're supported, and then the rest takes care of itself from there.
Ellie, is that part of the conversation you would have had with companies in the past? Is in that sort of creating uh, healthy work culture to know that, look, your workers are human, they're going to need supports like
Yeah.
this from time to time?
Absolutely, and psychological safety is paramount. I do believe it is paramount to most companies. Agendas that they don't want extra attrition because somebody didn't feel that the company had their back. But actually, what I thought was really interesting this morning, Niall, the main news topic that I heard when I was driving the kids to school, apart from that big storm that's going on outside, was actually that one of our presidential candidates has come into, under a lot of not investigation, but the media are asking her why she employed someone who had a criminal record. And it's that right to start again. This person obviously it's not a conversation for now, but that person did their time. They actually went on to get, I don't know, master's or PhD and proved to be very, competent. But the presidential candidate is now having to defend that something that went on in their past, should that have prevented them from getting this, that role. But my point is, those things do follow people around, but as long as you're aware of it, because I think the most important thing is that you raise it and that takes back the control. So I think that's important to remember.
And unfortunately, that's all the time we have. That's it for this morning's Tech Central webinar, again in association with Sophos. I'd like to thank our panel, Ellie, Jonathan, Jennifer, and Brian. It's been a fascinating
Thank you.
conversation. I'm so glad you all found time to join us this morning. And of course, if you wish to catch this event again, we will be posting a news story on techcentral.ie, where you can also get rolling news, blogs, and listen to the Tech Radio podcast, all of which can be delivered to your inbox every day through our Technology Minute newsletter. Thanks everyone for your time, and have a great day.